Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to this talk. And welcome to the third and last day, sadly, day of IGDC, sorry. The title of my talk is Cauldrons, Designing Backwards for Horizon Forbidden West. But before we start, who here has played Horizon Forbidden West or Zero Dawn? Oh, that's a good number. All right, really good, really good. So I don't have to summarize the whole thing, that's good. All right, so let's get started. Click. Allow me to introduce myself. You already have my name, but I'm Dennis Mika, Senior World Designer at Guerrilla. And my game design career really started in 2013 when I entered at Guerrilla during Killzone Shadowfall, a launch title for the PS4. Fans over here. After that, I tried the indie life for a couple of years, producing a game called Karma Flow, the rock opera video game with some friends. Indie life was hard on me, so I returned to Guerrilla in 2017 during the production of Horizon Zero Dawn's DLC, The Frozen Wilds, and at the start of the new game, Horizon Forbidden West, where I ended up as the owner of the non-main quest Cauldrons, the optional Cauldrons. So, what is this talk about? This talk is about the development of the optional Cauldrons in Horizon Forbidden West. And we'll be zooming in on Cauldron IOTA specifically. And this talk will be more about my personal experiences and thought processes, and less about the ins and outs of level design. And sprinkled throughout this talk, I'll dedicate a slide to every lesson I've learned, building these levels and summarize them at the end for you, of which designing backwards is the biggest and most important lesson I've learned myself. And I'll tell you why later. So, to start, what even is a cauldron? This is also a cauldron, but we'll be talking about these. In the world of Horizon, cauldrons are these subterranean sci-fi robot foundries, the place where our world's machine animals are born, basically. They're basically a version of Horizon's dungeons. And your goal, playing as Aloy, is to locate and override the cauldron's core, its main processing unit, to acquire new machine overrides with which you can hack machines in the overworld and get them to fight on your side. And gameplay-wise, Cauldrons tend to focus on exploring this outworldly space you're in. They are light on environmental puzzles and always have one climactic boss to defeat. And this is the timeline that shows the entire production of my levels in Horizon Forbidden West. And I'm using this timeline to show you how I've structured this talk. We start with pre-production, where I'll cover the prototyping phase and the pitching process. Then I'll show you the first two versions of the tallneck cauldron and the point where I hit a wall and was super stuck on designing this thing. Then I'll make a little sidestep, a little detour to Cauldron Chi, because while designing Cauldron Chi, I learned a lot of things I could use to help myself get out of this pit with Cauldron Chi. And then I'll return to Cauldron IOTA to show you how I got the version that ended up in the final game. So Horizon Zero Dawn had cauldrons, so the very first thing I needed to do was study those and understand them, because I was making cauldrons for the second game, so I needed to at least replicate what came before, right? So I took them apart in Maya, tried to get a feel for their angular design, for their flow, for their everything, in an effort to understand them. And while studying those, I figured they had this formula. You find the entrance, you dungeon crawl to the core to get your machine overrides, you find the boss before getting to the core, or getting to the core, you defeat the boss, you override the core for those overrides you need, and then you're done. You exit the cauldron. And they all adhered to this formula, except Cauldron C. Because, for starters, C feels completely different because it's a broken cauldron, it's powered down, and you're fighting bandits instead of machines. And when you get to the core, you aren't at the end of the cauldron. Because with the previous cauldrons, the core would be the final part of the level, which I've shown you in the previous example. But in C, you're only halfway the quest. You still need to backtrack the entire thing, while being in the middle of fights between bandits and machines. And breaking this formula, I realized, made Xyz stand out and memorable from the other Cauldrons in the game. And I knew I was going to need to make my Cauldrons memorable and stand out as well if I were to make worthy successors for Horizon Forbidden West. So on to prototyping. After all this studying, I had some time to do some prototyping. And I started prototyping by grabbing things that already existed in Horizon Zero Dawn, changed them up, or added some stuff to see if I could create new types of gameplay. And in this example, I removed a big chunky robot part from the moving platform to create a moving platform you can stand up yourself while fighting off machines. And this helped me, I believe, create one of the more memorable sections in Cauldron Yota, which is this one, where you're on top of a tallneck head, on a floating tallneck head, while surfing your way back to the Cauldron score, while fighting off machines. So it's practically the same thing, right? And that already brings me to the first takeaway, which is make good use of your pre-production time. So start prototyping early to create a library of things you can cherry pick from later on during development. And meanwhile, I was putting together a very high-level pitch document to show my lead and my director where I wanted to go with Cauldrons. And my initial pitch document wasn't much more than a one-pager per Cauldron. These are 2 pages, but it's just a big image to sell the idea, and some scribbles of text. And keeping the Zero Dawn Cauldrons in mind, I tried to give each Cauldron its own theme, both aesthetically and narratively, but also gameplay-wise, which were not used in Horizon Zero Dawn. And I pitched the following Cauldrons. So the first one was going to be a basic Cauldron, because I needed a baseline, basically, to show players where I wanted to go with Cauldrons. So nothing crazy, just a plain, boring Cauldron. And then I would pitch the tallneck Cauldron, the big star of this talk, Cauldron Yota, where you would help build a tallneck. There was one more Cauldron that got cut, sadly, because that's reality of game development. A dying and overgrown Cauldron, this became Cauldron Chi. And a flooded one, this became Cauldron Kappa. And for this talk, you only really need to remember Cauldron Yota and Chi. And for those who didn't raise their hands when I asked about who played Horizon, this machine over here is the tallneck, the biggest machine in the game. And tallnecks and Cauldrons were both fan-favorite activities in Horizon Zero Dawn. So in my mind, the math was pretty easy. I take a tallneck, mash it together with a Cauldron, I get a tallneck Cauldron, and I win. And we all strive to create the coolest content, right? The coolest games, the coolest moments in games. So I pitched the following crazy idea. What if we ride a freaking tallneck out of a freaking Cauldron? The elevator pitch was. Ha. But it almost didn't happen. Although everyone agreed it sounded really great, it also sounded very complex and thus potentially super expensive, especially for side content like my Cauldrons. Luckily, some scoping exercises done by production freed up some previously blocked budgets, and we got the green light to start working on this level. So let me show you version 1. Working title, The Cauldron. It all starts with paper design. And with the paper design, we try to create a high-level, top-down version of the level. This is also what we use during the pitching process to show our lead where you want to go with Cauldrons, or with your level. And it can be as easy as a scribble on some paper and markers. And when this is approved, we can go to the high-level blockout phase, where we try to get a feel for the size and flow of the level. So this one got approved. And in this version, I had a strain of Hephaestus infection taking over the core, just like it did in the Frozen Wilds. And the idea was that Hephaestus, which is one of the main antagonists of the game, it's an AI, would have taken over and repurposed this cauldron to create big combat machines instead of Tallnecks. And Aloy would need the Tallneck's EMP to purge away the physical infestation using the Tallneck's EMP, its electromagnetic pulse. But for that to work, she would need an intact Tallneck. So let me show you how this all came together. So I figured Tallnecks would exit Cauldrons through a missile silo-like door, a door Aloy wouldn't be able to open. And this would be right above the Cauldron's core room. Notice, by the way, how Yota's original location would be the Las Vegas area. So you find another way in the cauldron, into the cauldron. And you rappel into the cauldron, which gives you a clear overview of the problem, which is the infection. And by rappelling straight into the core, I really try to break that formula I mentioned before, where the core usually is your last room. And when you get closer to the core, you can see this unfinished Tallneck tucked away to the side, presenting Aloy with a potential solution to the problem, which is the infection. And the solution would be the Tallneck's EMP, because Aloy is a smart girl, she puts everything together. Your quest will become fix the Tallneck. So you would climb around the Tallneck, bringing you to this tunnel on the right here, leading you into this area of the cauldron where the cauldron would normally produce the fins Aloy uses to climb Tallnecks, these things. And in this room, you would purge Hephaestus from this side of the cauldron, allowing it to create Tallneck parts again, instead of combat machine parts. And as you can see, this is very, very high level, but that's all that's needed in this stage. It's just to show my lead the flow and the size of the level. No gameplay is needed. And as you, as a player, follow the new parts, the newly produced parts, you get looped back to the core room, where you will be shown the fins getting installed onto the Tallneck. And with these fins installed onto the Tallneck, you can now reach the other side of the cauldron, the left side of the cauldron, and repeat the same thing. You, again, liberate some infected machinery from that side of the cauldron, and help it produce Tallneck neck segments again. Again, you get looped back to the core to witness the cauldron assembling all the pieces. But first, you would have to defeat a boss, Hephaestus, the bad guy, sent in to kick your butt for messing with his grand scheme. So you defeat the boss. You climb onto the Tallneck, which you're now able to do, all the way to the head, and override the Tallneck to trigger the electromagnetic pulse. And the pulse zaps away all Hephaestus infection, or goal. And now you can hack the core to get your machine overrides, and because we wanted that epic Tallneck exit, that would mean you'd have to climb the Tallneck again, and that flow was pretty bad, right? You just want to exit the cauldron after getting to the core and not climb the Tallneck again, something you've done before. So I might have to rethink this. So to summarize what worked and what didn't work for this version, looping the player around the cauldron had a narrative purpose, which was very good. And I really liked the fact that you helped build a Tallneck, one of the big friendly machines in the game. And helping it build also unlocked new parts of the level, which is also great. But what didn't really work was narrative, actually. Flow of the level. The flow at the end, yes. The part where you have to climb the Tallneck again was pretty bad. What also didn't work was narrative, actually, because narrative ended up wanting to use Hephaestus in one of the main quests. The main quest that would become Cauldron Gemini, and we didn't want to take away the power, this powerful ingredient from a main quest, because the main quests are leading, basically. Fine. So without Hephaestus, my entire design fell flat. Takeaway number 2. You might already know this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Game development is full of hurdles. It's an iterative process, and it's only natural things will change. Mechanics will change, narrative will change, and things will get cut. You have to be adaptable to survive. Version 2, the second chance. Back at the drawing board, I came up with the following. And we also moved the cauldron to the north of the map, to where it is now in the final game. And with the Hephaestus infection gone, I needed a new reason why this cauldron was malfunctioning. And the answer came from the general theme of Horizon Forbidden West itself. Because in Horizon Forbidden West, the world is in a bad state. With the AI sub-functions missing, the world is spiraling out of control with all kinds of environmental disasters. And then I figured an earthquake could do massive damage to an underground facility like a cauldron, potentially disrupting the production of a tonic. And that story, the story of the earthquake, started outside as you enter this crevice to find the side entrance to the cauldron. And this time you rappel straight into the tonic room. Your quest would be to locate the core. You don't need the tonic right now. Then you climb around the tonic and get behind it and get a hint of the production area there behind the shield. So the area is shielded off for now. And it's a bit hard to see with its lighting, but it's an energy shield. You can't pass it. And the only way forward is to the core, where you again fight a boss machine and again hack the core. So you override the core, thinking you've completed the cauldron. But then an earthquake or an aftershock happens, and that causes the platform that is supposed to take you out of the cauldron, and it grinds it to a halt, so it stops. And your new quest objective becomes find a way out of the cauldron. And with this core platform raised up, there would be a newly revealed space underneath, and I really like the idea of exploring what's underneath the cauldron or in between the cauldron, kind of like the Redman dance in Portal. And in you go through this tunnel lit by dimmed lights and get looped back to the tonic room, where you could see the silo door above the tonic, slightly ajar, got raised lighting the room. And in version 1 of Iota, the previous version, I'd had you collect 2 tonic parts to complete the tonic. And to reduce complexity, because less is more, this version was going to have 1 part you'd have to collect to complete the tonic. And if it was going to be just 1 part, it was going to be the most vital and the most obvious part of a tonic, which is the head. Yes, thank you. And Aloy figures that maybe if she fixes the tonic, she could use its EMP to resuscitate, to reboot the cauldron facility and get out. Fix the tonic becomes the main objective. So you can now access that production area I've showed before, the one that was blocked off by the energy shield, because the aftershock or the earthquake also disrupted the shield. And there you can free a tonic head and serve it back to the core. So you get the tonic head installed onto the tonic body, because we really wanted that epic sequence, right? That epic sequence where you exit the tonic out of the cauldron. You had to be on top of the tonic to trigger its EMP. Everything didn't really feel great, but it was something, right? So I was really happy with it and showed it to the game director, but he didn't really like it. So what worked and what didn't? Serving the tonic head was pretty cool, and I was pretty happy with the reduced level size. But narratively and lore-wise, this one was a bit wonky, because Horizon lore dictates that machines are being built, being born in cauldron core rooms, sorry. And that meant the tonic room I had before technically also was a core room, and that meant this cauldron was getting 2 core rooms, and that was, that didn't feel too right. And at first we were like, why not do it? That makes it unique and memorable, right? But then narrative also wanted a cauldron with double cores. So again, this one didn't survive. And takeaway number 3. The sooner you start with a high-level blockout of your level, the sooner you realize your paper design is potentially flawed or just didn't translate that well into 3D. So fail early to identify this as soon as possible and reiterate. But all of that failing also has a big downside. with deadlines creeping ever closer, and me still being stuck in the paper design phase, running out of ideas fast, I found myself scribbling dozens, or it felt like hundreds, versions of Jota that didn't make sense to me. None really clicked. I had all these separate level chunks and moments in mind, but I couldn't fit them together. And if I were a writer, you could say I was having a writer's block. Straight into another takeaway, because the imposter syndrome is real. But don't let it get you down, because everyone has had this at some point. And if they say they don't, they're probably lying. And Kendra McCarthy did a great talk on imposter syndrome here at IGDC the first day, and if you missed it, check it out on YouTube. So I was super stuck on Cauldron Jota, and I decided to let it rest for now and move on to Cauldron Chi. And I realized this is not this is a luxury, but I made sure to use it. And I didn't realize it as I was building it, but Cauldron Chi taught me something very valuable, something that would help me with all future cauldrons. And let me show you what that is. Click, Cauldron Chi. That lesson was designing backwards. I'm going to try to explain what I mean with designing backwards. So the little detour, Cauldron Chi, a completely different cauldron. Give me a sec. So Horizon Forbidden West was going to have a bunch of new player mechanics. And one of these mechanics would be the poolcaster, with which Aloy can grab onto certain types of objects and pull on them to manipulate them. And I knew early on I wanted to theme a cauldron around this mechanic to make this the cauldron feel memorable and unique, to make it stand out from the others. And then I figured this mechanic would fit that broken cauldron I pitched before, the overgrown one, because to me it didn't make sense that Aloy would be able to move strong, moving robotic arms. And to prove to myself, most of all, that I could build an entire cauldron around this one mechanic, I started with one puzzle, with the main puzzle of this level. And in this puzzle, you'd have to manipulate a defunct, a broken wrecking arm using your poolcaster, these arms, to get yourself up to a platform that is just out of reach. And having players realize that they can rotate a big broken arm was just part one of the puzzle, because the actual puzzle would be having players realize that they have to reuse that arm to get a big, heavy quest item across the space later on in the level. And before we move on, this is important, because I'm going to show you the level in the same order I built this in, set piece to set piece, room to room. So not chronological like the previous two examples, but hopefully not too confusing. All right, so I started with this big puzzle arm room. Once I got that puzzle right, I created the entire space around it. And this is what I ended up with. This space was also big enough to house a big combat encounter and didn't have too many distractions, hopefully. And I always made sure, it's actually something I always do with levels, or rooms in levels. I always try to make sure when you enter a space, you both get an epic overview and a clear overview of the puzzle elements, or at least the way you need to go, so the exits or the puzzle elements. And this is what I ended up with for this room, for this space. And after the big puzzle arm room, I started thinking, what is that big quest item you need to get across the room later on? And I thought about the theme of the cauldron, overgrown and defunct. So what if the quest item was part of the core? So I built the entire core room after the big puzzle arm room, and once you've interacted with the core zaps you, because it is missing a vital core part. And why is it missing a vital core part, I was thinking. And the answer I came up with was scavenger machines. Because this cauldron is overgrown and dying and defunct, the scavenger machines are taking it apart, taking away the good parts for later reuse. And they all collected all the parts in this giant scrap heap room. And so the scrap heap room was born. And to not have too much time between your first and second interaction with the big arm, the big main puzzle arm, this scrap heap room would be placed right between the core on the right and the puzzle arm room on the left. So you kill the scavenger machine that's really trying to defend its treasure, and finally grab the parts we need to insert into the core. And if you remember from the previous video, there was a zip line, and that was there to hopefully clearly tell the players that they can't go back that way, especially not carrying this big heavy part, right? So they need to find another route. And that other route led you to this energy shield. The energy shield separated the puzzle arm room with the scrap heap room. So you could already see the scrap heap room from the puzzle arm room, but couldn't go in there. And now you're on the other side and able to remove the shield. So this room leads us back to the puzzle arm room. And in doing so, we successfully connected the end of the first part of the puzzle, where you get yourself to the platform that's higher up, to the beginning of the second part of the puzzle, where you need to get the puzzle part, the big core part, across to the same platform. So you bring the core part back to the core, where you need to install it into the core to get your overrides. But once you do that, a big, angry, scary machine boss pops up, and you defeat it. And after defeating it, you can actually escape the cauldron. Now, back to where we started, because we can now work towards the middle part. Middle and end part we already figured out. And I wanted players to see the big puzzle arm room. I wanted that as soon as the players saw the big puzzle arm, they would recognize it as something they could use the poolcaster on. They could manipulate it straight away. So I knew I needed to remind players that they actually have the poolcaster, and they knew how to use it. And this is the reason why the tutorial puzzle room was born, this space, where you have to manipulate a bunch of items to create a path up, a path that would lead into the puzzle arm room. But I also didn't want to overwhelm the players with all the pullable objects. Fly. So I created a tutorial space for the tutorial space with just one thing you could manipulate in a safe environment. So no machines around you, no overwhelming things. And I did this solely to remind the players of the mechanics in a safe space. Because for designers, especially in open world games, it's very hard, maybe it's impossible even, to know when the player used a certain mechanic the last time. Could have been minutes, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months. Maybe they've never used it before. So I had to assume players had forgotten about the pool mechanic altogether. And then finally, I needed a starting area to kind of set the mood for this cauldron, the defunct and scary and broken. And this space connected the underground facility to the overworld, to the world above. So you would rappel into this dark space, into this dark pit, and find yourself in front of a broken door. And the only way forward is through this glass on the right. By smashing it, you could go through. And it kind of felt like breaking into a space you're not supposed to be in. And cauldrons were exactly that. You're not supposed to be in cauldrons. They're made for machines, not for humans. So, cheese creation went very, very smooth, to my surprise, to be honest. And what's funny is that I wasn't really aware that I was designing this level backwards, or kind of backwards. And realizing this made me wonder if I could also apply this to Cauldron Yota, the tall neck cauldron, where I got super stuck, remember? So I went on and gave it a try. And thanks to Chi, things started to click for me. As a reminder, here's the first version of Cauldron Yota, version 2, and this is what I came up with for version 3. And small spoiler, this is the final version. Yay. Quick takeaway. It kind of makes sense, but when stuck, move on to something else, if possible, of course. Working on something else will allow your mind to allow you to free your mind that's been milling over the same problems over and over. And sometimes it's just better to just move on to something else, or take a step back and return later. You probably also learn new things you can apply to the things you've parked, like I did. So back to Cauldron Yota, version 3. And with this being the version that made it into the final game, I'm going to fly through the blockout stage straight to first playable. And first playable basically means that your level has all the elements it needs in any passable state, and your quest is fully progressible. And once your level reaches this stage of the process, it gets implemented into the regular external playtests to provide a continuous stream of feedback. And like Chi, like the previous example, I'm going to show you this level in the same order I built it in to clearly show you the flows of thought, my flows of thought. So I started with the core room because I knew this Cauldron's big set piece moment would be the Tonic exit. And the core would house that sequence, right? So I started with a space that housed that sequence, that hosted that sequence. So in the core, you would fight and defeat the boss machine. And the behemoth we just killed in this video was a Horizon Zero Dawn machine, but we used those as placeholders for the Forbidden West machines that were still in development. So you hack the core to get your machine overrides, hopefully subverting expectations, making people think that they've already finished the Cauldron. And luckily, player feedback told us exactly that. So mission achieved, partly. And this time, the core platform stops because there's an unfinished Tonic in the way. So you go underneath the core, something I've carried over from the second version of Cauldron Yota, and extended it a bit with something I prototyped during prototyping. And then, a bit like a painter, I went on to another part of the Cauldron, something that would also be brought over from a previous version, serving the Tonic head. So the head would be stuck on a jamming wrecking arm. We had to modify so it could actually hold a big Tonic head. And I made sure, again, to create the best possible view of the elements you would need. And I ended up with something like this. So you get to the Tonic head and free it. And then as you're surfing it to the core, you find yourself on this path. And the path had a subtle bend in it, so you couldn't exactly predict how long this ride would be. But as you turn the corner slowly, or the double corner, you can see the energy shield. And behind the energy shield is the Tonic in the core room. And organics, like Aloy, can't pass through energy shields. So at some point of the ride, you need to get off and find your way around it. You would find this tunnel that leads you to the core room. And while you are in the tunnel, the head would be mounted onto the Tonic's body. And when you open the door, you'll be just in time to see the final seconds of assembly. And this way we could skip a very expensive, or potentially expensive assembly scene. And the view I wanted you to have of the Tonic dictated the way this Cauldron tunnel connected the two rooms. And Aloy would comment on the core assembly arm, the thing we're climbing right now, that is malfunctioning and unwilling to let go of the assembled Tonic. And Aloy figures, here we go again, triggering the Tonic's EMP might be the way to get out of the Cauldron, to force the Cauldron assembly arm to let go of the Tonic, with Aloy on top of it, of course. So you would climb the Tonic in a more classic way, and trigger the EMP. Start the final sequence. So with this in place, I went to the start of the level, because I could now work to what I've already figured out, to the middle part I've already figured out. Again, I start with an epic overview of the space. And you'd have to get down and navigate yourself through the cracked open Cauldron tunnel, witnessing the destruction of the earthquake from up close. So here I'm trying to do some environmental storytelling to set up some puzzle elements. So basically, I'm trying to feed you puzzle elements to puzzle together the story yourself instead of just telling you, hey, an earthquake happened and this is why it's broken. I wanted to make players feel smart. So the big set piece moments in this room would be the frame smelters. I resurrected from my very first blockouts. You might have seen them in the first video, or the first version of the Cauldron. And you'd have to climb across these to get across a gap. And fun fact, these things were supposed, again, to do some environmental storytelling, these were supposed to frame smelt Tallneck machine parts. But we didn't have budget for separate Tallneck parts, so they became Thundergel parts instead. We had those lying around, so we used those. No one ever notices anyway. And then after this smelter climb, I wanted a bit of a smaller space. This is a bit of a design trick where when you really want to go big with a big space and a big reveal, you first go small before opening it up again. So small room before the Tallneck reveal. But later on, we ended up opening it up again because we were a bit low on combat encounters. And I clicked too soon, sorry. All right, so now I needed to connect the underneath the core section to the Tallneck head section. And I had you see the Tallneck from behind this energy shield to hopefully create some spatial awareness and hopefully help the player know where they are without having to open the map. Then I added some traversable bits to get the players up there, because that's where you get to the Tallneck head, to the reveal of the Tallneck head I showed you before. And the yellow-orange mock-up geometry was there to be substitute a placeholder for a lighting pass that would later help me highlight those sections, or clearly tell the player where I wanted the player to go. And the Tallneck head is stuck in the dragging arm around the corner, so you can't really see it from here, but only when you get back up there. So with all the rooms in the design, with everything in, I needed to make sure the Cauldron, the entire level, fitted underneath the world. And that dictated how long the tunnel leading into the Cauldron from the overworld would ultimately be. Because all Cauldrons are underground. Takeaway number 6. And this is the big takeaway of this talk, which I don't really have to explain because I've been trying to explain this with the last couple of slides. Designing backwards or around set pieces. Okay, so we fly straight into the second pass, where we get one last chance to get the R team to do changes that aren't for bug fixing. And after a bunch of playtests, we amassed a bunch of feedback. And these were the must fixes for Cauldrons in general and Cauldron Yota specifically. So dying in a game is never fun, as you might know. And Cauldrons, my levels, scored the highest on player deaths. Whoops. Core room sizes were deemed too small to comfortably fight Horizon Forbidden West boss machines in them. And some playtesters managed to miss the Tallneck reveal, the initial Tallneck reveal, completely by not looking at it at all. So let me show you how we fixed these. So Cauldrons were death traps, and I designed them to have lots of places that could kill you, because in my mind, Cauldrons weren't supposed to be very human-friendly. They're spaces made for machines, not for humans. I created all these death traps, not because I hate you, but in my mind, it just worked that way, right? So lots of players died, which was bad, because it's a bad experience. So in the second pass, we fixed lots of these death pits by covering them up. And luckily, lots of the player deaths really were improved after this. Still, players died a lot, but yeah, get good. For consistency, I took the size of Zero Dawn's Cauldron cores because consistency reasons, but you couldn't comfortably fight Forbidden West machines in them. So we ended up scaling them up by 1.5. And then that tonic reveal. Some players manage to completely miss the tonic reveal. And it's a very important piece of the story, right? So some players manage to walk in this room looking down or around and then not completely missing the thing. So we started experimenting with camera magnets to hopefully magnetize the camera towards the tonic. And let me replay this for you. At certain points, you can really see how janky and how sluggish this was. So I think the player is trying to look away here, and then the camera pulls it back. So that wasn't a great experience. And once we got this in, the game design director was like, no, please get it out. So instead, the tech design team at Gorilla made it into a super sleek sequence, which made it impossible for anyone to miss the tonic. We also added a disc-like frame where the tonic head would be installed onto, because a completely decapitated tonic looked way too brutal. All right, so at the end of the project, we have some time for polishing our content before everything gets locked up and only bugs are allowed to be fixed. And please notice that this phase is a year long. So this is the entire production cycle of one level, one of the Cauldrons, Cauldron Yota. And blockout, because I got stuck, took nearly a year. Playable went quite fast, and then the art passes also went quite fast. But then we have an entire year for polishing and bug fixing, because AAA games are big. There's lots of bugs, and every bug can create new bugs, as you might know. Anyway, after 4 long years and a lot of love from a lot of people,
it worked! It's good to breathe some fresh air again.
thank you.
It wasn't too bad either.
I'm not done yet, but thanks. So fun fact, we designers have the power to set the time of day in script, and I always made sure you had the nicest time of day when you exited Cauldrons. So wrap up and summarize the takeaways. So use your production time well. This is the moment to start experimenting. Start prototyping early to build a library of stuff you can cherry pick from later during development. It will really, really help you, as it did with me. Be adaptable. Game development is full of surprises, and you'll need to be flexible. And you're going to make a lot of fails, but it's generally better to fail as early as possible to save yourself a lot of pain and time later on. The imposter syndrome is really, really real, but it's all right to feel that way. We've all had this. And if you haven't yet, you will. If you're stuck on your design, move on for now. When I got stuck on Cauldron Yota, I moved to Cauldron Chi. And Cauldron Chi taught me very valuable things that helped me continue with Cauldron Yota. And then, of course, design backwards. And or around your big set pieces. Because I know for sure I will always start my future level designs building from my big set pieces. And one final note on designing backwards, because in my mind, designing backwards doesn't literally mean you always start with the end of the level and then work backwards. You can also start in the middle, work towards the end and then backwards, like I did with Cauldron Chi, the Cauldron I showed you. Or start at the end, work a bit back, then to the start, then forward, like Cauldron Yota. What I'm trying to say, the order doesn't really matter, but starting with your biggest set pieces, your biggest moments, your biggest story beats, helps you figure out those beats, the beats you need to hit, the things you need to tutorialize to get to that point. And for me, that was the big tonic exit. So I would like to finish with some acknowledgements, because I couldn't have made these wonderful Cauldrons without these wonderful people at Gorilla. Game development is a group effort. My contacts are here as well, underneath Aloy, so please feel free to add me and ask questions, and I can answer if I'm able to. I think we also have some time for Q&A.
Okay, so we can take some Q&A. If you have some questions, can we see some hands? Okay, I see a hand.
Hey, Dennis.
Hello.
Yeah. So my first question will be like, as a level designer, I have always been struggling with affordances, like how we guide the player. Like as you mentioned, you have, like in Cauldron also, you have made those highlights really well. That player knows where he want to go, right? Where he will be reaching.
So you're asking about affordances?
Yeah.
Affordances are a mighty powerful tool for designers.
Right. So in like this whole big game, oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries, take your time.
I'm so excited. I'm got emotional. It's a beautiful game. So like as a level designer, making like not using the camera placement, like every time we shows in lot of game we shows that okay, we have reached to certain level, and now we are like the camera is showing where we want to go.
Yeah.
But like this, that is not how it works. Like using affordances is what, like how it should be. So how you made it like that's.
Yeah, so I think every game has its own ways, its own ways to show you where you need to go, right? And preferably, you want to have your level show players where they need to go. And honestly, after with blockouts, it's always very clear because everything is cubes and flat colors, and when art comes in, it becomes a bit more buddied. But art can also help you with pointing players forward. But it kind of depends on the game itself, really, because games like Uncharted really embrace the camera moments because they're a cinematic game. They really grab the camera and then show you where you need to go, and also give you a nice epic overview, right? And the game director at Horizon, Matthijs de Jonge, didn't really want that. He wanted the environments themselves to show you where you needed to go, which is a challenge, but also makes the game feel less hand-holdy. Horizon, don't get me wrong, Horizon is still pretty hand-holdy, but in an effort to make it less hand-holdy, we try to really get it in there with just environments. So, to be fair, he wasn't really happy with the thing we did for the door, for the sequence, but we felt it was really necessary because it was such an important story beat. Have I answered your question? Yeah? All right, thank you. Also, please scan this QR code to review the talk. It will really help me and the IGDC to come up with future talks. Thank you. Question here in front? Or in the back? So many questions. I can also take questions outside at some point, because we need to make space for the next talk.
Hey, not really a question, but I just want to say this was the best Cauldron I've played in all of the Horizon, like both the games.
Thank you.
And I remember the moment when you come out, it was like, it was one of those goosebump moments that very few games aim to achieve. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I someday want to meet the person who designed this Cauldron. And today I got to do that. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
Seeing the secret sauce behind why the science and your thought process behind how you achieved that also really helped to understand. For example, when you spoke about maps, I remember I never needed to open the map in the Cauldron, right? I just realized when you spoke that, oh, there was a map that I could have accessed. But that speaks to the great design, right? So again, thank you so much. and I'm looking forward to the next iteration.
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, this is the reason why we game developers do games, right? We want to make memorable moments for people. And thank you. This is why I do this. You're making me blush.
I see some questions in the back.
Yes.
Sorry, we're trying to get mics like everywhere.
Oh, mic is coming up.
So just like how you mentioned for Cauldron IOTA, you use Cauldron Chi to sort of distance yourself from the problem and solve it. Were there any other responsibilities in development that you were managing aside from the Cauldrons that helped you distance yourself and like look at the problem for a larger scale and see how you can proceed and like tackle the challenges you had in the Cauldrons themselves?
Can you repeat this? There's a lot of echo from this spot, so it's very hard to hear.
So aside from Cauldron Chi that helped you
Yeah.
distance yourself from the problems you were facing in Cauldron IOTA, were there any other responsibilities aside from the Cauldrons that you managed that helped you realize how to fix the challenges you were having? Does that make sense? If I can.
So you're asking me about challenges with the other cauldrons specifically, or?
No, were there any other responsibilities other than the Cauldrons that you were handling that helped you?
Gotcha. Thank you. I got you now. I also. Is this? Hello? Yeah, better. I also was responsible for the salvage contracts. So of course, cauldrons were already a big responsibility. But we're working on this game for 4 or 5 years. And at some point, cauldrons were in development with the artists. And I had some free space, some free time to work on other content. So at some point, we wanted to have even more content in the game. It's already a big game. But we were tasked to do salvage contracts, and salvage contracts are basically fetch quests, which were a really nice challenge because we were tasked to make this extra content, these extra fetch quests, without adding new stuff. So we had to reuse things we already had in the game. And what we really tried to do with fetch quests, the challenge I really liked was making fetch quests fun. And I was actually considering doing another talk on this specific topic because I think, I don't want to compliment myself too much, but I think we did really well making these fetch quests feel less fetchy. And what we did was we achieved this by both variation. So basically you always get a part at some place and return it to the quest giver, right? But we always flavored it in such a way, getting to that part always felt very different. It's either getting a part of a machine or finding a machine and then sneak behind it. And so player in Horizon, you kind of get taught that you just want to kill all machines, right? It's a machine and it gets you loot and valuable things. And one example is, for example, there's a Sunwing, the flying machine. It's also a scavenger machine that took away some loot to its nest or to some spot. And then I tried to really undermine, to subvert the things you've been taught. So instead of going so first of all, you need to lure in the machine. It's a scavenger machine. So you need to create some bait by killing a smaller machine. And then hide in the bushes and wait for the scavenger machine to come in. And it flies in, grabs the machine corpse. And it's also a really cool thing to see. So we have all these awesome interactions between machines, but it's possible that you've never seen this. So with this quest, I'm really forcing you to see scavenger machines pick up smaller machines to clean them up. That's also the reason we don't have machine corpses in the game, or story reason, the narrative reason why we don't have permanent corpses in the game, because they get cleaned up by scavenger machines. So while you are in the bush waiting for the machine to grab its bait, you don't kill it because you need to see where he brings its loot, basically. It collects its loot at a certain spot. So it's a very high chance that the quest item you're chasing is also there in its nest. So instead of killing the machine, you have to sneak past it and make sure he doesn't see you, or it's past it, you need to chase it. And then as it lands and turns around, you need to hide again. So to really, and then after you get to the nest, you can actually kill it if you want to, and then get the quest part. So by doing this, we really try to subvert everything you've learned in the game, And it's still a fetch quest, but it feels completely different. It feels like a completely new experience. Another example, because I'm really getting really excited now about this, the bellow bags are these big machines, two-legged machines, and they can spray fire or acid or other elements. And they have these big sacks on their back, and they're very visible weak points, right? So players playing Horizon shoot those things first because it's a big weak point, so you destroy it. And then, but these sacks hold fluids of value to the quest giver, the fetch quest giver. So he needs those fluids, and to get those fluids, he needs an intact bellow bag. So with this fetch quest, I'm basically saying, go get this thing, go kill this machine, but do not use its weak spots, basically. And I tried doing this with all the salvage contracts. Didn't all really work out, I think, but most of them had these elements, and I think that's really what helped me create less fetchy fetch quests. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have time for one more question. And yeah, any hands?
And again, I can take questions outside.
I think we have some left.
Nothing. Or you have to be really loud. Okay, this is not working. All right, let's take questions outside maybe, so we can clean up the room. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, amazing session. I loved it very much. I love the games very much as well. And I haven't been able to play Forbidden West yet. I did really love the Cauldrons of the first game. And one Cauldron I found very interesting from your list of Cauldrons that you mentioned here was Cauldron Kappa, I think, which is apparently which has a lot of water elements.
Yeah.
So water element is not present in the first game at all. So I feel like this is something, I feel like it's a very new mechanic and it's very different from the Cauldrons that has been made before it. So was the process of making it different, and how was your thought process different in making this specific Cauldron, is what I wanted to ask.
So if I understand correctly, because it gets an echo, you were asking me how the Forbidden West Cauldrons are different from the Zero Dawn Cauldrons, or what elements I used from the first game?
No, I didn't mean all the Cauldrons. I meant specifically the Cauldron Kappa.
Okay, yeah.
Which has a completely different mechanic from the first game, which is water.
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah.
So I feel like that may have caused a slightly different development procedure because none of the other Cauldrons are centered around a fully different mechanic, is what I feel.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't exactly know how Cauldron Kappa is, but I wanted to ask.
All right. It's maybe also worth doing another talk about, because Cauldron Kappa is also a cauldron in Horizon Forbidden West, and it has changing water levels. And I think I could do an entire talk about the imposter syndrome about this, because that was the cauldron that really got me down at some point, because it's a very complex system. For people that have played Ocarina of Time, Zelda Ocarina of Time, you might remember the water temple, which was very, very hard. And I'm a big Zelda fan, and I try to incorporate elements from Zelda in cauldrons. But Cauldron Kappa was, I kind of felt I needed to do this because Horizon was getting swimming mechanics, underwater mechanics, so I had to create a water cauldron. And I didn't want to just not use the water levels, because the main quest also has a quest where you have to lower water levels, but that's it. You kind of drain an area and that's it. And I wanted to use those water levels to make it, again, memorable and unique. And cauldrons were the perfect place to do this. Yeah, I'll probably do another talk about just Cauldron Kappa, because Cauldron Kappa is another beast. Thank you for your question.